Welcome to the fifth installment of the Inspire series of interviews. Our guest today is Stuart Watts. He and three friends, known as the Four Oarsmen, are the world record holders for the fastest Atlantic Ocean crossing. They completed the challenge in January 2018 and raised a large amount for charity.
On the 12th of December, four friends will put their bodies to the ultimate test to raise awareness for the cause.
We're going out into the unknown. We've done 5 days at sea before, but nothing more than that, so it's a little bit scary.
Hoping that all the sort of work that's gone in over the last 18 months is going to come together.
When you get out there in the ocean, you feel so incredibly insignificant. You're a tiny boat in a huge expanse of water. In a sense, that's scary, but at the same time, we're looking forward to it. That's what the challenge is all about.
You get the chance to see a whale, other, I suppose, natural events. I think that would be a real highlight.
We're looking to do ourselves justice, and we've had a lot of support from back home. We're lucky in that respect. We've raised £250,000 for mind and spinal research.
This will be the biggest adventure of my life.
Sunrise, this is a very, very fast race. Team Antigua and the Four Oarsmen have been battling it out.
It's all a bit choppy, but we are making good progress.
Swift Motion coming in on a far more southerly route.
We're going to do everything in our power to look at and catch the Oarsmen and Team Antigua.
Incredibly, we even had a solo Mark Slats fighting to the lead. We are going to see that first place coming in under 30 days. That's not just a race record, that's a world record. And at this stage, it could go to any of them.
I'm proud and happy to announce the winners of the 2017 Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge are the Four Oarsmen. We have also smashed the world record in the fastest across the Atlantic Ocean ever.
Well, Stuart, a very warm welcome to our Inspire series of interviews.
Hiya.
Stuart, we are really interested in seeing and having a discussion with you about your experiences about being a world record holder as such. And we've just watched this fantastic clip of you and your experiences with the Four Oarsmen. And I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit more. We kind of see the text message exchange at the start of the video, but could you tell us about how the row came about?
Yes, so we're obviously a team of four, and Pete Robinson and I had just finished cycling John O'Groats to Land's End. And we did it de-supported, and loads of things went wrong, but it was really good fun. And all of us, all four of us, have sort of full-time jobs in London, and we were quite keen, and we were always all keen on different adventures. So we did that. We did it in 6.5 days. And I suppose we both felt like our lives in London had all become quite safe and quite regimented. So having a bit of freedom and doing it de-supported and succeeding, when we got down there, Pete thought maybe we should do something much bigger and do it for charity. So Pete then created a WhatsApp group called Atlantic Crossing and then invited us all to it. And that was where it started. And that was 2 years prior to the race starting. So we had 2 years prep from there. And I'm not sure how much you're aware, but none of us had ever rowed before. So we all had to go away and think about it practically, how we might have to learn to row and how we go about it from the start. But I think pretty much as soon as we all received the message, we decided we'd do it. And I think the reason why he chose rowing and why we all came together is we all happen to be 6'4". So if you do a challenge, you may as well do something you've got a fighting chance of being good at.
Absolutely. And, I think my next question is that you'd never rowed before. So how do you prepare to row across the Atlantic?
Yeah, none of us had ever rowed before. And actually, any of the guys or any of the teams that row the Atlantic, they consider learning to row sometimes to be, they're almost too macho to learn to row. And although all the ocean rowing boats are built to replicate actual river rowing, some people don't really put the time and effort into doing that. So there were kind of three things we ticked off. One was obviously we thought learning to row was important, and then getting the boat or ship shape and ready to go, whatever that was, because we didn't know at the start, and then raising as much money as we could for charity. So those are the three big things we were looking to kick off. And the learning to row was easy for me because I'm based in London. And actually at the time I was working for a firm called Daltech, who are based in Hammersmith. So I could just go and join Oriel Kensington Rowing Club there and they could teach me to row.
Okay, good. And you touched on the charity element. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about how that charity element of this row came about? Yeah, so three of us are farmers' sons. And I'm not sure people are aware, but there's a huge mental health issue amongst farmers and a high level of suicide. And George's mum was a patron of mine, and ultimately she became an alcoholic and succumbed to that well before her time. So we were all on board to raise money for Mind. Yeah. And the other one was spinal research. My brother was in a very bad motorbike accident and has a bad spinal cord injury. But one of Pete's friends in Hong Kong is also paralysed from the neck down from a rugby injury. So we chose spinal research and Mind for the two charities we were looking to raise money for. And what element of kind of inspiration or drive does having these two charities that you are supporting and charities that are so close to all of your hearts, is that something that inspired you in some of your toughest times? I mean, that was kind of everything, really. So we only had two main objectives. I know I sort of said the three things before, but those are kind of practical elements to us actually getting to the start line. So it's something that people don't normally talk about. But a lot of people, believe it or not, talk about rowing the Atlantic. And a lot of people enter the same race which we entered, which is the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. But very few get to the start line because you can sometimes lose track of what you need to do to get there. Okay. The charities played a huge part. So what we were trying to do was raise money for them. And then the other objective was for us to do ourselves justice across while doing the race. And we knew if we did well, there's a chance we'd be able to raise more money. And money is a big key part to the race. So we had to just keep focusing on, and we had 2-hour-long calls every Sunday, and all we would be talking about was raising money for the charities. And the other bits around the physical training, the learning to row, and getting our boat ready, we know would all come out the back of us getting the charity bit started first. And the practicalities behind that for anyone who's looking to do a big event was you had to kind of start off with a name, a brand, a logo,
3 of us had never used Instagram before, so we had to set up Instagram accounts, Facebook, and then build a whole website. And all of that, it's almost like starting a whole business, which ultimately paid off.
Yeah, and touching on that, so does that, that sense of the business, is that, are you talking about getting sponsorship and those kind of things to actually fund your training, the race, Can you talk about that side of it, kind of the training and how you actually got, you just said most teams don't get to the start line. How did you guys manage to get to the start line?
Well, to start with, we set clear distinctions. So the money raised and given by the general public, it went straight to the charities, and we actually bought the boat virtually straight away, because if you want to get sponsorship, they have to, or big corporates, which is who we were going to try and raise the funds with, want to know that you're serious about it as well. So we bought the boat with our own funds and funded the majority of the actual getting ready for the start line and everything with our own money. So that's how we did it. But we were all in our mid to late 30s, so it felt like spending that money would be a good investment. So that's how we did it. We predominantly funded it all ourselves, and then everything we raised went to charities. But we had 2 elements to raise money for the charities as well. So the website, we had a 250 club, so anyone of friends or friends of friends who'd heard about us, they could pay £250, and for that they get a t-shirt, and all that money would go to charity, and then we would give them live updates when we were on the boat. And then the other big element was our kind of how we were going after big corporations like Accenture, Taylor Wessing, and big law firms, the company I was working for, Dowtech and Knight Frank, and businesses like that as well. So we were corporates, really tapping up friends for 250 quid. And then we did a big event. And the big event, for anyone who's looking to do this as well, is that we got the event. It was I should plug them, because they actually gave us the venue and all the booze for free. And we did a charity auction. So we were able to raise £100,000 just in that one evening. And I know lots of people put on big black tie balls and those sorts of things, but you have to spend so much money in order to put it on that actually what you're getting for the charities is dramatically diminished. So we were pretty set on profit, raising as much money as possible.
And Stuart, kind of touching on the training before we actually get into the discussion of the row, which I'm sure everyone's desperate to hear about. When you were training, were you still having to work and train? How did you guys manage to get in all of that training for this mammoth expedition that you took on?
So we're all, the 4 of us are massively competitive. So all of us were training anyway. So it just meant kind of tweaking our training and it's actually quite individual. So you want to be, believe it or not, you want to be really flexible, obviously really strong and heavy. So we all wanted to be over 100 kilos, and you've got to have, it's quite a strange thing, because you've also got to be as strong as you've ever have been, in good shape, but also have plenty of fat, because there's no way you're burning over, I don't know, it's over 10,000 calories a day. So you can never eat that much. So you need to have a good amount of body fat. And then you had to kind of tailor your training so that you were ready for the start line. And we didn't really pre-describe anything for any of us. It was just like, you're going to row the Atlantic, do what you need to do to make sure you're ready for that. And we were conscious around weight gain. We also, I don't know whether this is of interest, we also did it on no carbohydrates.
Yeah, I read that somewhere. Yes.
Yeah, so we did it all in ketosis or fat adapted. And that was because it's not like you're running 100 meters, you're not learning to burn through glycogen. And you have, for race rules require that you have to take the right amount of calories depending on your body weight. Okay. And we're the heaviest team ever to row the Atlantic, so we were going to have to take across so much food, whereas fat's a lot more calorie dense than carbohydrates, so we were able to take slightly less food.
Okay, interesting. And so in essence, Stuart, it was see you all at the start line, get on with your training, and let's go row the Atlantic.
Well, that worked to a point, and then one of the guys, one of my teammates' friends, the personal trainer, and he met with us all, and he was the guy that came up with the idea that we should do it in ketosis. And he was like, look, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. You shouldn't be just trying to kind of get massive. You've also got to be doing really long endurance rows. So we started doing 2 or 3 hour ergs, and we also did 3 24-hour rows and 1 40-hour row on ergs as well. Okay. So practicing that 2 hours on, 2 hours off. So he luckily stepped in with about 9 months to go and kind of synced us all up. But we'd done a lot of it before then.
Okay, interesting. So my favorite headline while I was doing some research prior to this interview is from Sky News, and it says, naked rowing, hallucination and whales, what it's like to row across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the actual row itself? I know that's a very general question, but I think, you're going to clearly have some highs and lows and some pointers that I think you feel we would really like to hear about. So could you share some of that with us, please?
Yeah, so the race is like, so we did it as part of a race, and we chose to do it as part of a race because there's a lot more PR marketing that could mean we could raise more money for charity. And it starts off in La Gomera and finishes in Antigua. So it's about 3,000 nautical miles.
And the 3,000 nautical miles isn't 3,000 miles, is it?
No, it's slightly longer. So you start off, and the reason why you do that is that the prevailing wind and current is that way. So you couldn't go from Ireland to New York, for example, because that would be against the current. And they choose to do the race in December and January. That's not when there's the strongest wind, but there's when that's the least chance of hurricanes, because hurricanes trace across the Atlantic the other way and can push you back towards land. So that's the race in essence. And there were 23 teams that lined up on the start line, and there's teams of 5, 4, 3, 2, and singles as well.
Wow.
But the fastest boats are nearly always the 4s. And yeah, that's pretty. I mean, race rules are you have to pass stringent security and make sure all your boats are all ready to go, and then you all set off in sort of 15-minute increments and chase each other across the Atlantic. And actually, for us, doing it as part of a race is great because we're all competitive. And although when we set out, we were like, okay, we're just going to try and do ourselves justice. The first 24 hours were just, it was awesome. It felt like us to be like a one-day race. And after a week, all the physical training you've done is irrelevant because everyone's about as fit as each other. So yeah, that race element was important for us.
And highlights from the row?
I mean, there are ups and downs on every single day. Yeah. So sunrise and sunsets are amazing. And believe it or not, I think when it's raining as well, it's kind of can almost try and pan the sea flat. And there's obviously nothing around you. So just looking out over just endless blue, that's kind of a real natural high. Nature's great, and it was so not. We saw whales, I think, 2 or 3 times. Although it's something we all talk about, and I think sometimes it's because it's an easy answer. But we only saw animals for about 15 minutes in a month. Wow, so they are great highs, but they are by no means, you're not seeing whales every single day. Other kind of, I suppose it's quite individual in that not only had none of us ever rowed before, none of us are sailors, so none of us had spent any time at sea before. So I think there were nights when our closest competitors, a team from Antigua, and we were really fighting out for who was going to win the race, literally mid-Atlantic. And it was the reason why we broke the record was because the weather was so bad. Like this, it was 40, 50-foot waves, just huge, great big things. But for us, it kind of, being naive to it meant that in a way we were enjoying it, as unsafe as it is because you're completely de-supported. We were going so quickly. And the Antiguan team told us when we got to the finish line, we met them when they arrived, they couldn't believe that we hadn't deployed our sea anchor to stop us capsizing. Whereas in our boat, we were completely naive to it and just enjoying the fact how fast we were going. We just couldn't. I was like, God, we're gonna get there in like 20 days if we keep going this speed. So yeah, and those are highs. Food every time you get to eat, and every time your 2 hour, I mean, I probably shouldn't say every time your 2 hour shift was over, that was a natural high because you'd have 2 hours in effect not rowing.
And just one of the pointers that's coming through here is, I mean, your world record is 29 days and 15 hours. Is that correct?
Yep.
And it was never really a target. You guys didn't go into this race wanting to break the world record, did you?
No, we didn't know that we'd broke the world record until we got to Antigua.
Amazing. So until you got to the finish line, you hadn't a clue.
Not a clue. And it isn't something we talked about either. I mean, we talked about, to start with, we didn't even know where we were compared to our competitors. And then one of the dads, Dickie's dad's a dairy farmer up in Northumbria, he just worked stupid hours. So there was a YB tracking system, so they could track every 4 hours how we were doing compared to our competitors. And with our sat phone, he'd just send us through text messages saying, you did 98 miles today, you are 14 miles ahead of so-and-so. And it would all be, that's how we know where we were. Would just simply every 4 hours, there would be an update.
And having kind of obviously spoken to Dickie's dad, did that mean that you had contact with family? What sort of contact did you have with the outside world, Stuart?
We try very little. We'd call home, all of us, once a week. Yeah. And it's actually really difficult because you start off, and two of my teammates, Pete and Dickie, were sick for 3 days. They couldn't eat anything, but luckily because they were in ketosis, and we just left the start line, they had lots of body fat and that sort of thing. Mm. And then when you settle into a routine, we went so hard to start with. We hadn't washed ourselves properly. None of us had eaten enough. So we'd actually done what we said we wouldn't do and had already quite bad open wounds. So on our hands, feet, your bum. I mean, your bum is just ruined because the heavier you are, the worse the pressure sores become. Yeah. And I think for all of us, no matter how your hands were in ribbons and your feet were just bleeding all over the deck, it was always sitting on your bum. That was the that was the killer. Yeah. So you're going through that physical pain, and then we all called home over Christmas, and then my dad puts me on loudspeaker, and they're just sat around like 30 of them having Christmas lunch or half cut. And it's impossible. They don't understand because they're never going to row the Atlantic. And similarly, exactly what they're doing. And it's very difficult to communicate. And I'm not a particularly emotional person, but it's like, God, it's just easier not to have that conversation and just get the job done. And we knew we were going across the Atlantic quite quickly. So, yeah, all of us only ever called home sort of three or four times. Okay. Total. So not much communication. George, who's the only one of us that isn't dyslexic, he wrote an amazing blog. And I've got no idea how he did it, honestly, because I was rowing for 2 hours. Then in my off shift, I was just pouring food down my neck, wiping myself with wet wipes, or doing a little bit of boat maintenance if that was on my rota, and sleeping. Meanwhile, he was up writing a blog. what seemed like almost daily.
Amazing.
So very few communications.
And on that then, kind of what were relationships like in the boat? You know, did you guys get on? Were there moments when you really irritated each other, or actually were you just too exhausted to even think about these things?
Yeah. So, no, we were fortunate. And I think, I'll always say this, okay, for competitive people, we were lucky because we were winning the race. So if you're winning the race, I think everything, you're like, keep it together, guys, keep it together because we're winning. This is all good. So we had that big advantage. The other one was that we hadn't ever set out to break any world records. Our whole thing was just to do ourselves justice. So, and there were other teams that were far more experienced than us. And the start line, I can't tell you, everyone's like sizing each other up on who's going to be the best, who's the biggest, who's the kind of strongest, who's spent more time at sea or logged more hours, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think we had. So we also didn't have a captain. So I know I said we're all the same size. Yeah, we're also so stubborn. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it must be the four of us would be a nightmare to manage because we're all so headstrong. Okay. In that if someone's going to tell us one thing, we're all going to want to do something different. So we would do everything via consensus.
Okay. An
example would be, I mean, I'm very gung-ho in my attitude to pretty much everything, which means I'm more relaxed, but it also means I would take more risks. And George, who's a lawyer, was on our boat, is the opposite. So him and I would always have kind of heated but good discussions around what's a good plan. As in, if you want to push the boundaries, but similarly, you don't want to risk your life. And you're basically always on that tightrope. Yeah. So no, we were so lucky. We're all still mates. If something came up again, we'd definitely do it all together as a challenge. So it went really well.
Good. And so that kind of gets me on to all of you now. You're still really close, and are there discussions? I mean, is there something else that you guys may be considering?
I think we sort of touched on it before, but all of us are in full-time employment, and that's something like time management, so savage in the lead up. So 2 years before, you're kind of training for 2 hours a day. You're probably doing 2 hours worth of rowing, admin, whatever that would be, all the charity works, preparing presentations, preparing speeches, whatever, building websites and that sort of thing. So you've got to be so strict with your time. And I actually had a really productive 2 years with my previous job. Mm-hmm. And I think my other colleagues did as well. So being that stringent with your time, it meant that you had very little free time, no TV, for example. But it kind of played well for us. Yeah. I think coming back and going back to work, and all of us apart from Dickie have got new jobs now because it's so hard to come back and go back to your old previous life. Apparently it's very common. We're all just starting new roles or a kind of a year into our new roles. So we couldn't dedicate 2 years of our lives to something. I think we'll continue doing things like a big open water swim or long distance cycle rides or any sort of, I suppose, normal fun adventures, not something that requires 2 years and trying to raise 350, what was it, nearly £700,000 by the end.
Okay, I was just about to ask that question. Kind of. So, how much did you raise for the charities?
Just over £700,000.
Okay, so made a massive difference to the charities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we divided that into exactly equally between Mind and Spider Research.
Okay, amazing. And you touched a little bit on kind of coming back into normal life, Stuart. Was that really hard in the immediate days after the row? Kind of how did you manage those early days? You know, you've spoken about the slight change in job and things like that, but you know, how did those first few days, weeks, months pan out for you guys?
So I think there's two sides to it. One is physically. So when you get off the boat, I hadn't really stood up for a month. So there's certain parts of your body that are almost everything, all your muscles in your legs are kind of, the ones that you haven't used have completely withered. You don't have any kind of mobility or dexterity in your feet because they've just been used to drive against a foot plate. So physically you're in tatters. You can't walk properly for about 2 weeks. Mentally, you get there and it's euphoric. It's amazing. For us, we hadn't been drinking. We weren't really drinking before the race started, except for a few exceptions. And then so we got there, we could have carbohydrates. So we're straight eating burger, chips, and having Caribs or whatever the local lagers were and all that sort of stuff. So it goes euphoric. And then we were really busy because we'd broken the record and we were trying to raise money for charity. We were full on doing PR. So it was all, and your body's quite weird because you're doing 2 hours on, 2 hours off for the whole month. Even though you're exhausted, your body after 2 hours, you can't, you're in a funny sleep pattern. Yeah. So you're physically trying to get used to it. And then once the euphoria is gone and you come back to the UK, there's a lot of kind of people wanted to ask you questions about what it was like. And then I suppose then you have to come to, can you go back to what the reality was before? And I think for all of us, the answer was probably not. Even though all of our firms had been amazing to us, all in the lead up, all of them would sponsor us. When we got back, kind of, I think I lasted sort of 7 or 8 months longer. And then I just decided, it's completely life-changing. I similarly need to take a step forward. I need to change as well.
And so on that, Stuart, what was the biggest life lesson that you took from that and that you are kind of still using today?
So there's two. One in kind of, I've always played sport all my life, and I've never really been that great. Like I haven't played to international level, but I've always been competitive and always liked pushing myself. And now I look back on it, I think, God, I thought I was trying hard, and the reality was I probably wasn't, but I wasn't mature enough when I was younger to understand what trying hard looked like. So now I think I approach life as in everything is possible. I mean, in the meetings I go to and someone technical says that they can't do something, I'm like, it's quite difficult. And I don't ever say it out loud because you'd come across as someone you wouldn't want to work with. But I'm thinking, mate, I rode the Atlantic. All I'm asking you to do is like an extra 3 hours work. And unfortunately, that kind of attitude is with you for everything. Is that someone saying that it isn't possible, that doesn't swill at all. And it's hard coded. The other thing that I'd say is so many people did so much for us to help us get to the start line and during the row. Kind of everyone donated money, everyone gave their time, helped us with training, helped us with advice. People that we'd never known or had only met once before, everyone was so kind to us. So, and it's something to do with, from now on, if anyone asks me to do something, I will definitely say yes. We're indebted to so many people. And it has made me think that if you're going to go into business, the first time you reach out to anyone, you really want it to be when you don't need to ask for something. Yeah. So, I mean, favours go a long way. So I'm paying back a lot of favours now.
Well, Stuart, I think that's all that we've got time for today. So thank you so much for taking the time out to share your story with us. It's been really interesting hearing your perspective on breaking a world record.
No worries. Thanks very much.